With the first pick, welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Rant podcast presented by Stadium Rant. Make sure you check out the YouTube channel and all the socials. We got tons of content for you guys and plenty more to come with football season coming up. All right, this week we are going to be talking about some of our wide receiver. Oh, didn't introduce the boys. If you don't already know, I'm your host, Dan Baker. We got our crew here, Lee Cook, Mason Beck, and Evan Gooding here to break down the top 50 wide receivers. We all made some rankings here. We got our rankings ready to go, ready to debate. We're going to be talking about a lot of the disparities between our rankings, see, who comes out on top of these arguments. Make sure you guys weigh in the comments out there. All right. So we got a lot of players to talk about. I'm challenging us to pick up the pace a little bit this week. We'll see how that goes. But first up on the board, we got CeeDee Lamb. Oh, you know what? Let me share the rankings. Let's talk about the top 12 here. So our top 12 consensus, we took all four of our rankings, put them together. Top 12 consensus wide receivers are Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, and A.J. Brown. That's the top 6. Starting at 7, we got Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Devontae Adams and Chris Olave. So I was the only one of us to rank CeeDee Lamb as the wide receiver 1. Does seem to be a bit of the consensus, and I honestly hate doing anything with the consensus, but the demand for targets is just there. There's nobody on this team to even remotely challenge CeeDee Lamb. There's on top of them not bringing any wide receivers or tight ends in to challenge for his targets, there's really no rushing game this year. Tony Pollard was not an efficient running back last year, but the Cowboys definitely targeted him a decent amount. Probably will have more success with Pollard, even with him being inefficient, than they will with Zeke and Rico Dowdle. And just overall, CeeDee Lamb, absolute monster numbers, insanely consistent in half PPR formats last year. He had 6 weeks where he was a top 5 wide receiver, 10 weeks where he was a top 10 or top 12 wide receiver, another 4 where he was in the top 24, in just 3 weeks where he was a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3 or 4. He never had a game in the wide receiver 5 range. Super consistent, had the most red zone targets in the league last year, caught 13 of those, which isn't even crazy efficient. He had 27 targets and caught 13 of them. Pretty average. Second most touchdowns in the red zone behind only, surprise, surprise, Cortland Sutton, just with a ridiculous touchdown season last year. But yeah, the Cowboys on top of it, I don't think anyone's really going to, say too much about CeeDee being the top guy. But there's only one other player I think anybody would put as the wide receiver 1, and that is Tyreek. Maybe some people, Jamar or JJ, but I think when you're just breaking it down between those two players, Tyreek and CeeDee Lamb, the Dolphins threw the ball the 20th most. They had the 20th most pass attempts in the league last year, whereas the Cowboys were 8th. They lose the running backs, that could go up and still have nobody there to compete. Whereas Waddle should be healthier this season, should mix in a little bit more. Dolphins talking about mixing Achane into the slot. And last year, on top of it, the Dolphins' defense was absolutely murdered with injuries. There's just injuries left and right. I do think that, should that not happen again this year, they should be in more positive game scripts, some less shootouts. And the Dolphins added, not that they're giant names, but OBJ, Malik Washington, Jalen Wright, Jonnu Smith. all added to this roster where the Cowboys really did not add any skill position players. So yeah, that's where I stand on it. I know you boys all have Tyreek ranked first. Tell me where you're at.
Yeah, I have him ranked first, but it wasn't by a ton. It was not by a ton by any means. I mean, CD, I would pick CD over him for sure if I'm planning on getting like somebody later on in the draft, even that has I like a bye week. If I knew that he was landing on that same bye week as somebody else, I would that's how close they are for me. So it's not a very big gap at all.
Okay. The only other thing I'll throw out there too is just like roster construction, kind of like Evan, you were saying. It usually you have to be a top 3 pick to get either CD or Tyreek. If you think, like I do, that Jalen Waddle will have a bounce back year, obviously you don't want to roster both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. Go and get CD Lamb if you think he's going to have a similar finish, and then get Jalen Waddle in the early 3rd round. He's almost always there in sleeper drafts, at least. So I like the role, Lee.
Why I like Tyreek a little more is honestly they're pretty interchangeable. I'm just putting Tyreek a little higher because of what's going on with the contract talks with CD Lamb. That adds a little bit of worry, and that's morally what does it. I mean, CD could definitely have a better season than Hill, but just that I think that would make me lean towards Tyreek.
I totally get that. We've seen, not the same position, but like Josh Jacobs recently held out, did not have a good year last year. It always works against the players. Lee, I liked your message in the private chat here. Drink every time I say reception perception. I was going to say, I just said it once and I'll drink to that, but it's a good rule. I will be bringing that up today for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, CD Lamb, a little younger, had an incredible season. For me, and I remove any of my bias, because obviously I hate the Cowboys. Mike McDaniel is the play caller versus Mike McCarthy. I trust McDaniel more as far as an offense goes. I do think the contract situation does play a role, as Mason said. To me, the ceiling is a little bit higher for Tyreek. He had 9 games as a wide receiver 5 or better, all with at least 25 points plus. And that's league week winning performances. And I know CD had a handful as well, but I just 6 versus 9. I think Tyreek is the most explosive player in the league. And that's kind of why I would go with him. And him getting paid and sticking around for a little while makes me very happy for our Dynasty League. The fancy league.
I like it. All right. Let's move on to our next player here. We talked, just to recap again, Tyreek, CD, Jamar, Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams, and Chris Olave is the consensus top 12 for us. Some of us are not so high on Garrett Wilson, however. Yeah. Evan, why don't you talk about this?
Garrett Wilson does not make my top 12 here, as Dan listed off. And, it's a bolder take, but I'm starting to kind of think that I'm one of the only people that are coming to reality and kind of like people that are a little bit more down on Wilson this year, because this is a guy going into his 3rd year. He's never finished higher than wide receiver 20 or 19, I think. And, try to come up with, I know everybody loves using the, quarterback excuse, but I don't know. I feel like I would like to see a little bit more from him this time. And I don't hate him. He's wide receiver 15. This is still an improvement upon where he was last year. I do think he's going to improve. But do I think he's going to get into the top 12 caliber? No. I don't think he makes it there for me.
So what's giving you the hang up, though? Like, it's just the fact that he hasn't done it yet, or you don't believe in Aaron Rodgers bouncing back?
There's a few things. I know that Aaron Rodgers, loves – it takes a while for him to build chemistry, and he loves going to trusted sources. I'm also seeing them fighting on the field and not able to kind of get along. Seems like
They
they're
slapped up at the end of it. It was barely
but
fighting.
like obviously it's not going as smooth as they want it to be. That obviously
I get what you're saying, but that's how it is.
I'm getting bad vibes. I'm getting bad vibes from it. And again, I don't think that he's going to catapult. I do think he improves, but I don't think he catapults into a tier he's never even touched before.
All right. I mean, that's your take. Personally, I think, let's see here. We all have Garrett Wilson ranked at least in our top 10. Yeah, in our top 9 for each of us. I'm personally at 6, Lee at 8. Lee at 9, and then Mason at 7. So definitely a steep drop off. I just think there's not enough targets on this team to take away from Garrett Wilson. The only thing that would scare me a little bit is them using Aaron Rodgers more as a game manager with that stellar defense and Breece Hall. They don't have to rely on Garrett Wilson. But I think they're going to choose to because he's going to create the big plays for them.
Yeah, I mean,
what if the Jets offense just isn't there either, too? You guys are also betting on the offense entirely, the team that has not been very good offensively
because of Zach Wilson.
Yeah, because
everybody just slaps the Zach Wilson to the quarterback.
I was hoping you would do that on your own, and you did. You're a bit of a Zach Wilson truther, and I don't even know if there is a truth to be truthing.
What?
I'm not a truther. I'm not going to back him up and say that he deserves a starting job in today's day and age, but is he as bad and as terrible as the media and everybody makes him out to be? No, I don't think he's that bad.
Maybe worse.
What do you think he's worse?
Maybe worse. Okay, quick question. So Tyrod Taylor, Zach Wilson, who would you rather have starting for your team?
Starting for my team, I'd probably rather have Tyrod.
That would be my argument. I'm kind of with you on the Aaron Rodgers piece.
Yeah.
He had a drop off in Green Bay. Yeah, you missed a whole year. You're recovering from injury. You're 4 years old. You're missing mandatory OTAs to ride camels in Egypt. I don't like it. I don't like it, but I do like bringing in Tyrod Taylor as the backup. I think that raises the ceiling. I think Garrett Wilson finishing 26 last year with as bad as the quarterback play was, as bad as the offense was, is pretty good. I think he kind of showed he's quarterback proof, and you have a much more capable backup. Tyrod Taylor's not going to light the world on fire at this age, and hell, he may not be able to stay healthy himself. But if he is, he's a pretty fairly large upgrade from what we saw from Zach Wilson. I don't.
Everyone take a drink because you know it's coming. Look at this reception perception chart.
Okay.
Only the flat was the only route that he did not have an above average success rate on. He was in the 96th percentile against man coverage and 93rd against press coverage. 79th against zone is still very solid. The guy just gets open. He's a great route runner, and I don't really see that going away. And Rodgers does well with guys who are where they are supposed to be. So I think maybe it takes a little bit to develop the connection, but it'll happen.
I mean,
my big thing for Devontae.
Like Garrett Wilson last season had 9 games where he got at least 10 targets, and some of those games, the receptions weren't there, but that's because Zach Wilson was missing the throws. Like Dan was saying, Garrett Wilson gets open, and I mean, his last 2 seasons he hasn't had, the craziest finishes because this last season only managed to get 3 touchdowns. The season before got 4. Do you think that his offense is still going to be, not producing touchdowns with a way better quarterback? That's a big thing. I mean, if Garrett Wilson doubles that and only even gets 6 touchdowns, I mean, that's going to boost him up a lot more than 26. I mean, I just think that, with the amount of targets you get, Mike Williams is really the only other competition, but he'll be hurt by week 4. And then, I mean, just Aaron Rodgers is going to allow that team to produce touchdowns. I mean, Breece Hall was the only real weapon, and every team knew that going against the Jets, that stop Breece Hall, the team's not going to score. And now there's, more variety in that offense, which is definitely going to allow a lot more scoring drives. And Wilson's going to – I guarantee you he gets at least 6-7 touchdowns this year.
Right. And, like, the red zone usage for Aaron Rodgers, top wide receiver, not saying that Garrett Wilson is early stage Devontae Adams, but he could be. He is on track to like have that type of value on his own team. Devontae, in his time in Green Bay, in every season he played at least 13 games. 14 touchdowns. I'm sorry, 11 touchdowns, 18 touchdowns, 13 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns. Like that, they will use him around the goal line, especially the offensive line still needs work. It's not an excellent run blocking crew. I don't think they're just going to be able to bully people in the trenches. And then just really quick, just to touch on how bad Zach Wilson was. Garrett Wilson last season, he had 168 targets on the season. Only 114 of them were catchable. That's a 67.9% catchable target rate, which was 65th amongst all wide receivers in the league. Bad. All right. You know what? I'm gonna skip over my next player, just give somebody else a chance to talk first here. I will be talking about our consensus wide receiver 10, but wide receiver 11 on our consensus rankings is Devontae Adams. Yet our boy Lee has disrespected the vet. What's going on, Lee? What are you seeing here?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. And honestly, as I was doing my notes and preparing for the show, I was looking at some of a few guys, and I told you this pre-show. Looking at a few guys I had even the last maybe 5 spots below Devontae, and I honestly think I'm still too high on Devontae Adams. Great player, Hall of Famer. He will be 32 years old going into the season. He is coming off his worst season, his worst full season since 2017. Of course, he had 2019 where he only played 12 games. But since 17, it was his worst finish. In half PPR, it was wide receiver 11. Honestly, I feel like with where you guys are ranking him, you're pretty much ranking him at his ceiling. And that is something that I want to avoid by all costs. And just to go over a couple of things, he had a good year. 103 receptions, 1,144 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's not a bad year by anybody's standards. However, he was very, very inconsistent last season. He had 2 huge outlier games where he was wide receiver 2 on those weeks. If you remove those 2 games where he had, I think, 42 targets, which is a healthy workload. If you remove those just 2 games, and I get it, those are his best games, so you can't just throw them out. But if you take those out, he would have finished the season with 77 receptions, 846 yards, and 4 touchdowns. But let's just cut those games in half, and you're still at about 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, which is a good year. It's not a wide receiver 10, a wide receiver 11 year. He had 4 games total where he was top 8, including the 2 huge ones. He played all 17. He had 5 games. He was between wide receiver 17 and 24, which isn't bad. But again, if you're drafting him at wide receiver 10 or 11, it's okay. It's not winning you a week. It's not losing you a week. He had 3 games at wide receiver 29 to 32. And then the really thing that stands out, he had 5 games where he was wide receiver 45 or plus, including 2 of those where he was wide receiver 100 or plus, which is really a pretty large outlier from any of the receivers we're talking about in this top 12 range. You can have bad weeks, but to be outside the top 100, he had 88% snap share or higher in all 5 of those floor games. I don't really want to invest in this Raiders offense. I know maybe Minshew is an upgrade, maybe he's not. We don't know how many games he'll get. We saw it wasn't great under Aiden O'Connell. They're going to be run first. I mean, I would take Zamir White at value, but he would be the only Raider I'm going to have pretty much any shares of this year. And again, he'll be 32 years old this season. He is well past his peak, and drafting him at his ceiling is not where I want to be. I want to get a guy who can ascend, and he is certainly descending.
Yeah, I mean those 200 or worse, games are obviously pretty bad. Those are, weak losing performances. But my only argument with that is, I mean, if you look at the week 8 still got 7 targets, which only turned into 1 reception, which, that's obviously pretty bad. And then week 16 got 6 targets, only turned that into 1 reception for 4 yards. He only had one other week, or his other 2 bad, like really bad weeks, where he got 4 and 5 receptions. From that, besides that, he topped 7 receptions minimum or targets every single game. I mean, and there's obviously he's still one of the elite wide receivers, and I just think he's gonna get those targets thrown to him. And Minshew will probably do better than Aiden O'Connell, and maybe even Aiden O'Connell's improved this offseason as well. Antonio Pierce has had some time to really see this offense and develop it as the head coach as well. So there's going to be more. I just think the offense will improve a little bit no matter who is starting as a quarterback. My only argument against it is Jacoby Myers is there, so he's gonna work as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to cut to the gist, I do think Minshew is a big improvement. We just saw him support Michael Pittman as a wide receiver 15 and half PPR formats. So I do think that Davante Adams is still, even at this age, a better wide receiver than Michael Pittman is right now. I think he's that dude. If you guys have watched the receivers too, you just saw how frustrating it was how open Davante Adams could be, and it's just he's 10 yards away from other people. Not even an exaggeration, and the ball was a good 10 yards over his head. Like, we could have hit that pass. So I think Minshew's an upgrade.
That's what you get with Jimmy Garoppolo.
All right.
Davante, though, I think I'm the highest on him out of everybody here too, and I'm admittedly a little too high probably, but he's an art form. His style is just an art form, and it's something that I don't think really ages. So I'm expecting him to have like a Keenan Allen year last year.
Everything ages. No, Father Time is undefeated. I'll take a wide receiver. I'll split the difference. I'll say he's not a wide receiver 15 or better if anybody wants to put that on the board for the bet.
I'd take that bet.
Yeah, I'd take that.
15 or better.
I'd take that.
All right. Okay. So we got our next player up. Hold on. Let me get this down. Wide receiver 15 or better. Davante. Okay.
That's total points, not points per game.
Yep.
Right. And that's a little bit on your side. He hasn't been,
Half
injury
PPR.
prone by any means, but we were talking half PPR, so I will allow it. Full PPR would definitely help our bet.
Yeah, they would.
All right. So the next player up is Marvin Harrison Jr. I have him ranked as wide receiver 15. Right now, our consensus ranking is wide receiver 10. I do think that overall, Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously an incredible prospect. There's no arguments there. I think he's going to have an incredible career, even if he, let's say in year 1, just because the bar has been set so high. If he gets 1,000 receiving yards, let's say 7 touchdowns, I don't know, 80, 90 receptions, that's going to be a disappointing season, especially for a guy that's going as the 204 right now. So right now, Marvin Harrison Jr. joins the Cardinals, who last year had the 6th fewest targets to the wide receiver position. They had the first most to the tight end position, and that is with Trey McBride not having a full snap share until halfway through the season. Really think that they're going to lean on Trey McBride, James Conner, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., but not enough to the point where he is worth the 204 draft pick. Kyler Murray has yet to throw for 4,000 yards in the season. He has also not topped 20, or he hasn't gotten 227 passing touchdowns. His top wide receivers each year, and granted, the last 2 years, cut short by the ACL injury, but starting in 2023, moving backwards, top wide receiver on the Cardinals was Marquise Brown, wide receiver 52. 2022, Marquise Brown again, wide receiver 46. 2021, Christian Kirk was wide receiver 26. There was 1 year in 2020 where DeAndre Hopkins was the wide receiver 7. That is DeAndre Hopkins playing at age 27 to 28 years old. That is a top end wide receiver in his prime doing the damn thing. And then in 2019, it's Kyler's rookie year. Larry Fitzgerald was the wide receiver 37. So he's had one DeAndre Hopkins crack the top 24 wide receivers. That's not great. Not a great track record. Kyler Murray is a great fantasy quarterback because of what he can add with his legs, but I don't know if he's going to be able to support a rookie wide receiver that is this highly touted. And again, I just want to make it clear. I do think that those numbers I put up earlier, 80 receptions, 80 to 90, 1,000 receiving yards, and I would say at least 5 or 6 receiving touchdowns, totally within the realm and would be a great rookie season for anybody else. But it's Marvin Harrison Jr., and when you take him this high, it comes at a big risk. I am very risk averse in my first 2 or 3 rounds drafting. I don't want my top guys drafted to be a dart in my ass. So at this high in the draft, the highest any rookie wide receiver has ever been drafted, it's just too high for too rich for my blood. So also the guys going right behind him, Kyron Williams, Devontae Adams, Travis Etienne Jr. I personally would take all of them above them. I know we just talked about Devontae, but I would take all of them over him. It's a proven commodity. And even if, for whatever reason, they were to get a small 1-2 week injury, you can still flip guys like that because of the proven track record. So that's where I am going. Love Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State Buckeye fan. So don't get it twisted. But that's where I stand on him right now, wide receiver 15.
I just think, Larry Fitzgerald and D Hop are, Larry Fitzgerald on his last season, I believe, if I'm not wrong. Aging
Right.
Larry, and then D Hop, obviously, that was a pretty solid wide receiver during that time. And you said Christian Kirk and Marquise Brown. I would say Marvin Harrison's probably already better than both of them. Maybe not Christian Kirk entirely yet, but give it like 5 or 6 weeks. Once Marvin Harrison is entirely acclimated to the NFL level, he will be. I think, he might have a slow start, but I think once it comes fantasy playoff times and Marvin Harrison Jr. really is getting his groove going, and it's going to be him and Trey McBride pretty much only, not Michael Wilson. That's not happening. It's going to be hard. And I just think at the end of the season, it's going to pay off. It might be a very slow start to the season. I mean, there's going to be some speed bumps. I think there's going to be some weeks where he might disappoint, but I think really come fantasy playoffs, he's going to win you some games.
I do like that point, just to chime in really quick. The whole, he is going to do enough for you at the beginning part of the season, and then come end of the season, he should be hitting his stride and really, contributing. So I do like that take there. I'll still put him I'll put him beyond wide receiver 12 on the season.
Yeah,
if anyone wants that action.
I was expecting to be the highest on him, but Lee tied also has him at number 8 with me. I did not see that coming. But yeah, and I guess I'm not really that much higher than the consensus. I mean, the fantasy, the FR consensus is they have him at 10. Our fantasy rank consensus is 10. So I have him at 8. He's not too much higher. I was expected to be significantly higher, being that he is a rookie, but these are incredibly large shoes to fill. And I think that's just kind of showing that.
And that was just our FR consensus. The sleeper ADP has him as wide receiver 9, so you're only one spot ahead.
And I absolutely love rookies, and I typically, I'm much higher on rookies. So the fact that the rest, it's weird. It's like normally I'm like the outlier. And I'm like, we're looking around, and like the rest of the world is like spinning with me, and I'm like, wait, what's going on?
So, cover your ears, Evan. I don't want you to hear this. There's a trend, and outside of 22, which was a little bit of an exception, these guys are coming into the NFL more ready to produce. It used to be kind of the common knowledge or common thought that wide receivers would take a few years. In 2020, and I know I'm about to name some big dogs, but in 2020, Justin Jefferson finished as the number 5 wide receiver in half-point PPR. In 2021, Jamar Chase finished as the number 5 wide receiver in half-point PPR. I said 22 was a little bit of an off year. Good receivers there, but none of them really in that right situation. And then last year, Puka finished as the number 4 wide receiver. I don't know that we can say Marvin Harrison is in the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase class yet. He's a better prospect than Justin Jefferson was. He's on tier with Jamar Chase. And I mean, Puka was in the perfect situation. Obviously, he was a late round diamond, but I mean, I think that's a real debate in Dynasty for me. Puka versus Marvin Harrison, who you take, because we have seen it from Puka. But Marvin Harrison is, if you went into a lab, weird science style, and I hope there's some older people in our chat and know what I'm talking about, because you guys don't probably.
I'm old enough at least.
If you went to the lab, weird science style, and you built your prototype NFL wide receiver, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. He was trained, raised, brought up to be an NFL wide receiver. His dad is one of the best ever. He is in the perfect situation to be a producer early on. I know, you mentioned a couple. I feel like it was a little unfair, those stats you did with Kyler, because the injuries and a couple of those seasons were cut short. And then Christian Kirk. Love Christian Kirk. He's a great late round flyer. He is not in the same conversation as Marvin Harrison. But
they had other wide receivers there. It's just who did the best that year.
I mean, Christian Kirk was the best guy there at that point. I think Hopkins was there but got hurt that year, if I remember correctly.
I think that was the year he was traded there, so he only had half the season with them.
Okay. Well, we have seen Kyler Murray support a high-end wide receiver one. And, yes, it was DeAndre Hopkins. I think Marvin Harrison is I think he's going to be a DeAndre Hopkins type of wide receiver. That's out there a little bit. DeAndre is an all-time great, but I certainly see that in his future. The lack of target competition. I mean, you've got McBride and nobody else. He is going – follow the volume, Dan. He is going to be a hog. I know you mentioned the stats last year, but again, Hollywood Brown was there on one leg for half the season and then just went away. Who else did he have to throw the ball to? There was a reason. There was a reason it all went to Trey McBride, and just perfect situation. It's scary ranking a wide receiver this high, but I think we're going to continue a rookie wide receiver this high. But with the trend, with the way these guys are coming out of college, I think this trend is going to continue, and we'll probably in the next few years have a wide receiver even ranked even higher than Marvin Harrison.
That's crazy. But all right, and just really quick again, Marvin Harrison Sr., my favorite wide receiver to ever play in the NFL, and I'm a Buckeyes fan, so you can't call me a homer. This is not it's not that. But let's get on to our next guy. Mason, you got your first wide receiver we are talking about today. Michael Pittman is the topic of conversation. Let's see what you got to say about your ranking. You know what? I'm sorry. Let's go over our next set of players here. We got after Crystal Olave at wide receiver 12, we have Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Brandon Ayuk, Devonta Smith, and then starting the back half of the wide receiver twos is Cooper Kupp, Nico Collins, Michael Pittman Jr. at 21, George Pickens, DJ Moore, and Amari Cooper to round out the wide receiver twos. Talk about it. We got him at wide receiver 21, and Mason, you got him ranked at wide receiver 13.
Yeah, so last year he did finish as wide receiver 13 already, and that was with, a worse quarterback play than he's going to be having this year. It was Gardner Minshew, which, at times, we were just kind of hyping him up that it's a better situation for Devontae Adams, which is kind of weird that, we're not doing that. But just finishing as wide receiver 13 last year with, not the best quarterback play. It's going to be better with Richardson, and Richardson did get 2 games where he played the whole way out, but I'm honestly going to say week 1 was the only one where he was 100%. And at that week, Michael Pittman finished as wide receiver 8. Throughout the season, he had, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games where he got at least 10 targets. Obviously they did bring in AD Mitchell, which could be a little, nerve wracking as well. Josh Downs was there, but today it was a high ankle sprain, I believe, that he suffered.
Yep, high ankle sprain, looking like a month.
Yeah, and that's an injury that can linger. It's something that's not, it's not going to come back necessarily be 100%. They might use him less. He could easily re-injure it. I think just Michael Pittman's a reception beast. He's going to get a lot of targets. And Richardson, it is the second year, but I am kind of going to consider it as his rookie year technically because, it's going to hopefully be the first season we really get to see what he can do. Pittman also only got 4 touchdowns last year. Obviously, Taylor's and Zach Moss got a lot of touchdowns last year, but Jonathan Taylor will get a good amount of red zone touches. I'm expecting, but I think Pittman's going to top 4 touchdowns as well. He's not necessarily always going to give you the top week winning numbers, but I think Pittman's got a very, very consistent floor. I mean, if you look at his 3 worst weeks, one was in week 4. That was when Richardson got hurt again. That changes up game plan a lot. Puts a lot of, it hurts the offense, the style, they don't have a game plan necessarily going forward from that. And then the last 2 weeks, he finished as wide receiver 41 and 51, but that was after he suffered an injury as well. So he wasn't necessarily 100%. That's a factor into it. But still, those weeks he was getting a decent amount of targets. It's just, with that offense with Minshew, they weren't necessarily always going deep. They're little short receptions. And he's going to be that consistent guy. And I think Richardson's really going to rely on him more. I think it's not going to be I really don't think he's going to run the ball as much as people thought. Obviously, he still is going to run the ball. But I just think with the amount of injuries that he suffered last year, hopefully being the franchise guy for the Colts, they are really going to focus on him passing more. And for a guy that still needs to be tested in the NFL at a true level, Michael Pittman's your guy, 100%. I mean, AD Mitchell, rookie, there's a lot of doubts with him after how far he fell in the draft. I mean, somebody, GMs obviously didn't like what they see. Pittman's really the only guy that is for sure a certain target on that team right now with Josh Downs going out.
Yeah, I do agree with that. He's going to be the security blanket. There's nobody else there. Adonai Mitchell is going to be a guy that's, used downfield. Alec Pierce basically was just given a bet, his rookie contract, but still a bag of money to go do cardio on the sideline. Just run up and down as fast as you can, and maybe you'll get a few targets here or there. They don't have a guy like Pittman, so I do agree with that. I just there's not enough for us to say that Anthony Richardson is going to be a better passing quarterback than Gardner Minshew. He had such a short stint as a college starter at Florida and then comes into the NFL and only plays basically 2.5 games. I know it's 4 games, but it was it was 30%-ish of the snaps in both the games that he ended up leaving early from. So really, he hasn't done too much to show me that he is going to be that dude. Why I'm so confident in him in fantasy is because of his legs. If he can just stay healthy, he is like a faster Josh Allen, which is crazy. But, he's got to stay on the field to actually be able to prove that he can have any fantasy value. So a little bit worried about that. I will say the backup situation, not too bad if he can repeat what he did last year. Colts bring in Joe Flacco, if you guys don't already know. Not you guys, but the listeners. And I think that type of system, kind of like Gardner Minshew, more of a statuesque, let's just hit the easy target. I think that system works better for Pittman than Anthony Richardson with JT and the RPO heavy Steichen system that he likes to run. He's been first in RPOs the past 2 seasons. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes. He's definitely the first read. And like we talked about, Josh Downs out. That's means Michael Pittman up. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm actually lowest on Pittman out of the bunch of us here, and I tell you, it's not because any lack of faith in Richardson or what that offense could do. And I really didn't think any news would come in that would adjust my rankings, but this Josh Downs news that actually does adjust my rankings on Pittman because I actually do believe that AD Mitchell could eat into this offense a little bit more. Obviously, I love the rookies, so I'm typically going to assume that. But I have him in the top 45, which just doesn't leave enough room with Josh Downs to have Pittman higher than where 27th for me personally. So, this would change if he would go up a little bit with the Josh Downs news because I would be worried that he would miss 4 games. That's enough. That's enough to bump him up at least a little bit. And if he comes back, is he going to ramp back in? What's that going to look like? So, definitely something that I didn't think I would have to consider and talk about. But overnight, this is football for you. Overnight, things can happen.
Yeah. And guess what, guys? This is another round of Take a Drink. Reception perception for Josh Downs. Better than anticipated. Last year, and honestly, I mean, just overall, his end of season numbers were pretty solid. I feel like not enough people are hyped about Josh Downs. Obviously, this will deflate his value a lot, this injury. But he had, 68 receptions, 771 yards, 2 touchdowns, nothing crazy in full PPR leagues. He was the wide receiver 43. Just his, rookie season operating solely out of the slot. He was amongst wide receivers who had at least 70 targets, and there was 59 of those. He was in the top 3 in terms of routes ran from the slot. So really held to the slot. I do think he could produce a little bit more downfield if he is allowed to go to the outside. But you see his route tree here. Great success on everything except for the 9 route, which is already the most difficult route to produce fantasy production on. And then on top of it, the production against man, 93rd percentile in terms of his success rate of getting open against man coverage, 82nd percentile against zone, 69th against press, which is one of the things that he was most judged for heading into the year as a rookie. So I think that he proved himself enough, and I would be willing to, at this point with the injury, not drafting him, but I would be willing to, take him off of the waiver wire maybe a week or 2 early to beat everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. For me, I'm just scared of Anthony Richardson, the unproven. Michael Pittman I agree with Mason that he does provide a very solid floor, but again, to be as high as was it 13 that you had him, I'd like to see a little more ceiling at that point in the draft. It's all about philosophy, and you do want to mix up your team some. So he provides a nice floor, but Anthony Richardson is to be determined, specifically as far as passing the ball and really be able to support a true. I mean, that's close enough to a wide receiver 1. Like I just don't know that he can support a wide receiver 1 in fantasy.
Yes, sir. All right. So I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit here. We're still into the top 24 wide receivers. We got George Pickens is the next guy up. I currently have George Pickens ranked as my wide receiver 18. Now, this entire argument goes to shit if Brandon Ayuk is traded to the Steelers. He becomes the top dog. So take it with a grain of salt. But last year, amongst, again, 59 wide receivers with 70 targets, Pickens had the most yards per reception with 18.1 yards per reception. He was 5th in yards after catch. After catch. I feel like not enough people talk about that. He's fast enough. He's big-bodied. He's strong. He can make it happen after the catch. He had the 9th fewest drops of any player with 70 targets. Only had 3 drops, 9th fewest there. And then he had the 14th lowest reception percentage. So despite having such a low reception percentage, and I wonder why with that quarterback room there, Stellar, Kenny Pickett, and Mason Rudolph, and Mitch Trubisky, it's only going up from here. Even with, Russell Wilson going through a little bit of an injury scare here, but what all of the training camp reports have been saying, and it's training camp reports, so take it for a grain of salt, but Justin Fields likes a downfield target. He likes extending plays way beyond the point where they should be extended, but sometimes it works out. And then he finds his downfield wide receiver, which was DJ Moore last year for much of the year. And that's going to be George Pickens here. Even if Roman Wilson somehow gets back on the field quicker than we think, he's not a downfield target. Van Jefferson sucks. Let's just call it for what it is. And then Pat Freiermuth, maybe he'll mix into the mid to intermediate range, but I really don't think that anyone's taking these downfield targets away from Pickens. Pickens, 63 receptions, was 36th in the league. 106 targets, was 27th in the league. Yet he had the 16th most yards with 1,140 yards. And, again, Russell Wilson, we saw what he did last year with Cortland Sutton. That was, an outlier touchdown year. Maybe George Pickens doesn't quite get to 10, but if he can improve upon his career high of 5 and get to 8 touchdowns even, that puts him in solidly into the wide receiver 2 discussion. If he had the full 10 touchdowns that Sutton had last year, Pickens would have been wide receiver 15 instead of wide receiver 26. So I do like Pickens a lot this year, so long as Ayuk is not traded there.
Yeah, I agree. And Dan, I think this is the one we're closest on. I had one away. I was one away with Pickens, so I had him at 19, just one below you.
Hey, man, we're ranking the top 50 here. It had to happen somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have Pickens there at 27. I might actually be the lowest on him. I could definitely see him beating that 100%. But I don't necessarily like the quarterback play either way. I'm not a big fan of Fields. Not a big fan of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson failed to really provide for any wide receiver last year, besides Cortland Sutton, who got, still finished as wide receiver 35, but that was due to the touchdowns. Russell Wilson he hasn't supported wide receivers in his time in Denver. And obviously when he was in Seattle, he did. So maybe that could change in a new style offense. I just think there's a lot of inconsistency. Ayuk really could go there, and that's what made me very hesitant off of it right now. Like I'm talking about when I made my rankings going off of news that was based right now, Ayuk could go there. And if that is, I'm happy taking Pickens 27, 28 wide receiver just because Ayuk's going to feed. He's going to be the number one. And then I even believe Roman Wilson. I mean, yeah, he suffered that injury, but I think Roman Wilson is a little more sneaky at taking away some time and, some receptions away from Pickens.
I don't see it. They just run such different routes. Like Pickens isn't going to be that short to intermediate area guy where I think that's where Roman Wilson succeeds. And then just really quick, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, but Cortland Sutton, basically ended his season in week 15, played little to no snaps after that. Through week 15, he was wide receiver 19 in half PPR formats. So Russell Wilson supported a top 20 wide receiver while that wide receiver was healthy. And I think Pickens is a much improved version, a much more athletic version of Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
The touchdowns were why Sutton was that high at that point. Sutton wasn't producing yards because Wilson wasn't allowing him to produce yards. It's just the touchdowns made Sutton.
That's Pickens' specialty, though. He had the most yards per reception.
10 yards after catch, yeah.
And, ton of yards after catch.
So I was going to interject. The difference is, and Denver's defense did play better, but they were behind. Their defense still wasn't great, but it was, historically bad at the beginning of the season. So they kind of had to throw the ball. They got no production from the running backs. a very different situation for Russell. I don't think it's going to be Russell. I think it's going to be Justin Fields, and in which case that probably helps your argument, in my opinion, Dan. But the Steelers are a defense and run the ball team historically speaking. They have a really good defense. I love George Pickens in best ball because he is going to win you some weeks in best ball. I hate having him on my roster because you very well he could lose you some weeks, and making sure you start him on the right weeks is the big thing.
Absolutely fair. He is definitely no staple of consistency.
Yeah.
Let's get on to our next guy, though. We don't got a ton of time left before we kick off the after hours here. Very interesting name on the board here. Evan, you got to explain yourself, buddy. 12. At the 12th, you got Malik Neighbors, wide receiver 12. That is absolutely insane. Oh, I did it again. All right. So starting from wide receiver 25 in our consensus rankings, Malik Neighbors is wide receiver 25. Then we have Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, Tank Dell, Christian Kirk. And then the back half of the wide receiver threes is Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, Chris Godwin, and Deontay Johnson, and Ladd McConkey. However, despite our 25th, even with your ranking of wide receiver 12 overall, we still have Neighbors down at 25. Speaks to where the rest of us are at, but explain yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it was really tough. It was really tough, and definitely bold. Want to get a nice bold rookie taken here, but coinciding with what Lee's saying with the trend, what's to stop another wide receiver? And both of these two, there were some analysts debating like Malik Neighbors is better than Marvin Harrison Jr., but it was always just these top two, a little bit of Rome talking like a tier, like a 3-tier of this rookie wide receiver class, but. I think that a lot of people are sleeping on this Daniel Jones-led offense, and rightfully so. Last year was terrible. It was a mess. But this guy is absolutely. I maybe just as you can tell with my rankings, I've been spending some time on Twitter. I might be a little highlight happy right now, but dude, he looks incredible. He looks incredible, and to get a true wide receiver one for a team that is I don't see any competition anywhere nearby. The only other big name people were talking about in the offseason was Darren Waller, now gone. So there's just a ton of opportunity for this young guy who just seems to be a menace on the field, and he's already shown that he's been tough to stop in the highlights that I've been watching from him against NFL players, where I've only been able to watch highlights of college before, but there's also so much tape on. I don't know what's going on. There's so much tape on him. You can't find this type of tape on Marvin Harrison either. He's catching a lot of eyes and a lot of attention right now, and I think deservedly so.
Just for the highlights, I think it's SEC versus Big Ten. Everything's kind of like owned by those conferences and everything, and it's a little bit easier to get your hands on SEC tape.
Highlights like in training camp, like recent highlights, like recent, like against the Lions, and like how they're doing there. Like it's actually like he's doing very, very good against the competition that I'm seeing him, which is NFL competition. Again, it's training camp. It's training camp, and I might be highlight happy right here off of that, but the vibes I'm getting, this guy needs to be in the wide receiver one. He could, and a lot of this too. I'm calculating a lot of the guys' ceilings into these rankings. I think his ceiling could even be better than this.
I disagree with the ceiling can be better. Even with my low ranking of Marvin Harrison Jr., I got Marvin Harrison at 15, whereas I have where is he? Malik Neighbors. Where'd he go? 26. I got him at wide receiver 26 after Amari Cooper, before T. Higgins, and before Zay Flowers, which I feel like is the most. Malik Neighbors is a better prospect than Zay Flowers was. However, they're in a similar type of situation, and got a quarterback that will choose to run the ball a good amount, more often than the average. Not necessarily the best passer, although Lamar's significantly better than Daniel Jones. It's just like these are the only targets on their team outside of like Zay Flowers having Mark Andrews. There's nobody else on the Giants, and that is why I have Malik Neighbors as high as I do. However, we have seen it in season, those frustrating targets time and time again. Devontae Adams, great example. The guy's wide the hell open, and ball is just sailed because the quarterback doesn't know what he's doing. Don't have any trust in Daniel Jones. And did they get a better backup there? Is it
I have a
still
little bit more faith. I have more faith in Daniel Jones. I think Daniel
They got
Jones.
Drew Lock.
Drew Lock? Yes, I remember. I remember because I was like, I don't know if that is that much of an upgrade. Definitely better than DeVito. DeVito is terrible, but it's just going to be, Drew Lock throwing up a Hail Mary downfield. Daniel Jones is only semi-fantasy relevant for one season in 2022 as the QB9. In that season, he had 708 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. He had about double the rushing attempts, more than double the rushing touchdowns. His next highest was 2. And then he had about 300 more rushing yards in that season, none of which translated through the air really. Hasn't topped 3,205 passing yards.
Who were his wide receivers?
He's never had any wide receivers, man. It's the Giants.
He's finally got a guy. Give the guy a shot. We haven't seen him. We are not even giving Daniel Jones a chance with the true wide receiver 1 before we're immediately shooting him down. And I think that Malik Neighbors' rankings are also being affected by that.
Well, yeah, they should be. His quarterback's ass.
I think he was ass with ass receivers.
Daniel Jones sucks. Malik Neighbors is really good at football, but they're going to have to find him a quarterback.
Yeah.
I can't rank him.
He's not great. He's not unbelievable talent, but he doesn't suck.
He sucks.
He doesn't suck.
He does suck.
He sucks.
He sucks.
But Malik Neighbors is really good. Draft him in Dynasty, but if you're expecting a wide receiver 1 finish in redraft, that's just too much of a stretch for me. I do think where he's going, he's provides some value with a ceiling, but the ceiling is only when Drew Lock gets in. I'll take Drew Lock over Daniel Jones any day of the week to support a wide receiver. I know we haven't seen it from him, but he looked pretty good in that game and a half with Seattle last year. So I like Malik Neighbors, but more long term.
Specifically for Neighbors, I think that you should wait a little bit, and then in Dynasty, wait for halfway through the season when everyone's frustrated. Go trade for him then, and bring him in on the low. Sorry, Mason, didn't mean to cut you off, bud.
Yeah. So Daniel Jones, 5 seasons, has played 60 games. In only 9 of those games, he's thrown for over 300 yards. And he's had 24 games where he's thrown for under 200. And yeah, he hasn't had much receiver help. I'll give him that. That, it's an argument. Daniel Jones' upside in fantasy comes off of his rushing upside, which that does not help Neighbors. But Neighbors is going to be an elite player once you get him a quarterback. I have no doubt in that. I'm pretty high on Neighbors long term, but just with Daniel Jones as his quarterback, there's no way that Neighbors can finish as a wide receiver 1. Maybe he finishes as a mid-level wide receiver 2 or back-end wide receiver 2. I can see that happening 100% because he's going to get a lot. I'm also a lot higher on Jalen Hyatt, actually having a big step-up year than a lot of people. And I know a lot of people are off of that, but I believe Hyatt still has some, he still has a chance to really show and prove himself in this offense. Wan'Dale Robinson are not very high up on either. He could also prove himself as well. But, I just think that there's just Daniel Jones sucks. That's plain and simple. He's not a good passing quarterback. There's just he's had some weeks where he's blown up, but most of the time, under 200 yards in 24 games, and you expect a guy on his team to finish as a wide receiver 1, there's no way. That not all 200 yards are going to go towards Neighbors. It's those games, maybe Neighbors gets like 50, 60 yards. And, if it's a little under half of the games Daniel Jones has played. So if you get 8 weeks where Neighbors is only getting 40 yards, there's no way he's finishing as a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, real quick, just to add, and those were the best, I agree with you, Mason. Some of the best stats I've heard you put out. So we're on the
I
same
like
page.
those stats as well.
They have a very good chance. If you had to pick the favorite to score the least amount of points of anybody in the NFL, it's the Giants or the Patriots. The Patriots were that team last year. They produced nothing.
Like Carolina, another good one.
All right.
Carolina was next.
Boys, I'm sorry. We got to cap off the Atlanta radio broadcast. Thank you guys out there for joining. Again, please do come check out the YouTube channel. Come mention your comments. Make sure you check it out. Subscribe for next week, and we will be talking a little bit more ball here. All right. Back at it, boys. Continue where you were.
With me was wow. Thank you. That means a lot from an old man. It means a lot that from an old man like Lee to agree.
Okay, so we can say it now. We're off the radio. Mason, why the hell did you pick this picture? I apologize to everybody on YouTube that's watching. We are not that kind of podcast. I apologize to you all.
No,
this was Mason and Mason.
Okay. Well, I did not even see that.
What do you think?
Oh, man. He doesn't even look happy. He looks upset to be in New York. And then he's got this weird bulge happening.
Yeah, well, so I was looking for pictures of neighbors, and I wanted to find him in a Giants uniform, and I found this, or like the only other one I could really find was him doing this weird, because like he was sitting in this weird pose, and it looked way too sexual. But I guess this is kind of worse.
Sexual in a different kind of way.
Put them both up there. Just put them both.
Maybe this is the reason why Evan's dick riding so hard. So,
hey, I mean, I didn't even know this is what you guys were talking about until about 3 seconds ago. But I'm all about it. Yes.
Check that private chat, bro.
He's gonna hog ride his way all the way up to the top 10.
I was cracking up as soon as you guys started talking about that. I was like, "Oh, I can't crack on camera with no explanation." But really, so Malik Neighbors, do you guys see him because like at LSU, he was kind of used as an intermediate to deep threat. Seemed to be the system. You know, Brian Thomas Jr. also that type of wide receiver, but had success downfield. Daniel Jones in his most successful, his healthiest season, 2022, attempted 23 passes of 20-plus air yards. That is insanely low. He did complete a decent percentage of them, 9th highest percentage in the league. However, the attempts were 34th out of 40 quarterbacks. So, you know, even if he hits on a high amount of these targets that he's giving, that's 10. That was 10 of them in his best passing season so far. That is absolutely terrible. I just don't see Malik Neighbors having the efficiency in this offense that is rarely going to be sniffing the red zone to really pan out as a wide receiver 12.
Can't keep it up on the screen now. No,
you guys are just laughing about dick jokes at this point. We should just talk to the Atlanta radio broadcast and be like, hey, listen, just like shift our hours a little bit back in the night, and we'll just come out guns blazing, talking about weird pictures that Mason chose and Evan dick riding and what a natural transition. Our next player we're talking about, Calvin Ridley, didn't place his bets in the safest areas, was suspended some time, comes back last season, has an okay year. He finishes as the wide receiver 18, not terrible. However, I think that with the shift to Tennessee, there's a lot of questions in the air. Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, 2 pass catching running backs, athletic tight end. However, we have Mason with a ranking at wide receiver 36. I do think that he is better than wide receiver 36. I think that is absolutely his floor. So, Mason, what do you think here? Why do you got him where you do?
My main argument is, honestly, I think D-Hop's going to be the wide receiver 1. D-Hop is way better, more talented. Obviously, he is older, so, there's Could be a little digression from D-Hop. Besides that, I don't have a ton of confidence in Will Levis to, really give Calvin Ridley and D-Hop, consistently good numbers. There's going to be some weeks where I think Ridley's going to produce a lot, but I also think there's some where there's going to be weeks where you're going to be maybe questioning whether or not you should even have Ridley in your lineup. Tyler Boyd's also there, who's going to take some, he is going to get some targets. I'm not super high up on D-Hop either. I'm not really high up on any wide receiver in this offense. Just like you were also saying, two pass catching running backs. When you got a guy like Will Levis who is unproven, you might check down the ball a lot more. It could, Tennessee has traditionally been a run heavy offense. Obviously, that was under Mike Vrabel, different coaching staff, but I still could see that being the case. With the running backs they have. I still do see Tennessee being a run-heavy team, and then just the target competition. I don't think it's not the greatest situation for having an unproven quarterback, and I don't like the situation at all. I think Ridley still is talented. I think he's got a lot of potential still, but just where he's at, it's a killer for me. I don't think I've taken him in a single draft this season, and I probably will continue to keep it that way. It's just. I think the ceiling is still there because I do think he'll have 3 weeks probably finishing as a top 12 wide receiver. I just think there's going to be some weeks where it is so bad that it's going to lose you some weeks.
So I want to call you out. I want to call you out, Mason, for something you just said, because I agreed with everything until you said DeAndre Hopkins was going to be the wide receiver one.
However, that was really early.
However, it was pretty early, but I was agreeing with the premise because I have Ridley at 33, so we're not far apart. You have Ridley 4 spots in front of DeAndre Hopkins in your own rankings.
I thought I put D-Hop as 33.
I see him at 40.
I put them in the wrong order. I'm pretty sure that I actually had. Yeah, because I do like D-Hop more than Ridley. So I actually have Ridley as wide receiver 40.
That's crazy. He's not even the top. He's not wide receiver 3.
I just while I was speaking, I'll finish. I like Ridley, but I think, and this is weird because Callahan is coming from Brian Callahan, the new coach. He's coming from Cincy. It was a pass-heavy offense. And I've said this before for anybody that's been listening. His dad is Bill Callahan, a renowned offensive line coach. They drafted offensive line in the first round of the last 2 seasons. They brought in Tony Pollard. They have Tajay Spears. I see this being a run-first offense. I think he's a smart coach. Will Levis is first full season starting. If you want to protect him, if you don't want to go the Washington route with Sam Howell, you don't throw the ball a ton. You run the ball. You utilize those backs. You utilize the first-round offensive line. I think Ridley will have a few hot weeks, but he's going to have some really bad floor weeks as well. And I like Levis as well to outperform where he's going, but I don't see any consistency from that wide receiver room this year.
That's really interesting because, I've been reading the tea leaves like you, and I feel like although they got J.C. Latham, right?
Yep.
He is a run blocking offensive lineman, for sure. However, I feel like they have 2 pass catching running backs. They have an athletic tight end. They bring in Ridley and Boyd. To me, that says that they are trying to pass the ball more. And then last year, Levis, although he had much more limited sample size compared to the other quarterbacks that still fell into this qualification, but Will Levis, 22.4% of his passing attempts were of 20-plus air yards. They were downfield. Calvin Ridley last year had the 9th highest ADOT at 13.9 yards. And if you guys, listeners, if you don't know, average depth of target. So that is speaking to the air yards. He had the 4th most targets of 20-plus yards. To me, that smells like, a guy who although we are going to see Will Levis miss on a ton of passes, when they connect, it'll be the plays that matter. Once they actually connect on those 20-plus air yard targets, which happens to be about a quarter of Will Levis's targets so far, I think that Ridley is the guy to capitalize on that. Boyd is going to be the slot wide receiver. Hopkins can operate on the outside, but he has been better suited to, a intermediate A dot level where he's not trying to rely on speed to get open downfield. I think that they rein him in a little bit more because Hopkins he had a very large A dot as well. And I believe he had the most 20-plus yard targets in the league last year. So I think they switch the roles a little bit, give Ridley a bit more of the downfield work. Yes, that will make him more boom or bust. But when he does hit, he will truly hit and be a difference maker. And you can draft him right now as the first or second flex option on your team. So I like that in a flex player, somebody who can win me my week.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I agree. I think Calvin Ridley is the wide receiver to own. I don't have DeAndre Hopkins ranked in my top 48. I think
that is also insane.
Evan doesn't either. That's something me and Evan agree on.
I agree as well.
I just think he's done. I think people get way too caught up on name value, and they don't know when to let go in fantasy football.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I have him as wide receiver 46 right now. Guys ahead of him, even like Curtis Samuel, Jordan Addison, Rome Odunze. Hopkins is 32. He's not getting any younger. And based on what I just said, I think that he is going to have a shorter, lesser A dot. He's not going to be operating downfield as frequently, which is going to take away from his efficiency. And Will Levis is not accurate enough to keep on dotting the possession wide receiver. So I do agree with that. I think Hopkins should definitely be lower than Ridley. I don't think Ridley should be into the top 24 wide receivers by any means. But right now, I have Calvin Ridley ranked as wide receiver 30. I think that's probably going to be the mean of what you see. And you're going to see people on the, ranking him heavy up there, and some people completely out on him. I think he should be somewhere in between, but he will be hard to predict.
It's funny you mentioned 30 because my ranking's 20, yours is 30, and then Mason's is 40. So I think that you are the mean average, and I'm not. I'm that one opposite.
Yeah, I mean that is literally the mean of those two for sure.
Yeah.
And Evan, just so you know, if we were to do a episode purely based on who is the furthest off consensus, the entire episode would be about your rankings.
Yes.
You rank boldly and with your gut, and there's no problem with that you're going to hit on a few. But at the same time, I looked through your rankings and I was like, what the hell is happening? I'm having a hard time deciding between 3 players only. All right, so we got Calvin Ridley for Mason. Lee, you're the only person who hasn't got to talk about at least 2 wide receivers today. I want you to take a pick between the 2. We'll keep the other one concealed for now in case we come back to it in a later episode.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is going to be no surprise if anybody's listening. I'm going to go Curtis Samuel here. I love Curtis Samuel this year. So, he's a guy who his biggest hang-up in his NFL career has been staying on the field, staying healthy. And obviously, we can't predict injuries. If he could stay healthy, he is going to outperform not only the consensus, he's going to outperform my ranking. And I think the thing that really stands out, and I probably should be higher, is he finished as wide receiver 42 last year. In a very dysfunctional offense, Washington did throw the ball more than any other team in the NFL, so that helped. But he was the second to third option for the majority of the season. Obviously, McLaurin got more targets. And then Jahan Dotson, was very hot, cold. He definitely underperformed. But excuse me, he only had 3 games last season. He played 16 games. He only missed 1 game, so he was healthy for the majority of the season. He only had 3 games where he had a 70% snap share or higher. Again, it was a very eclectic offense in Washington. There were just Byron Pringle was catching big passes. They resurrected Jamison Crowder. Brought him back from the dead, had him out there catching passes. It didn't make a lot of sense. The guys who were running a lot of routes. In his only season with offensive coordinator Joe Brady, who he's reunited with, he finished as wide receiver 25. He was competing against DJ Moore and had a aging on the very much back end Cam Newton at that point. He had 7 games that year with a 70% snap share. If you look around the Buffalo receiving room, he is the only proven NFL receiver. He's the only guy who's ever produced for more than 1 season. You've got Khalil Shakir, you've got Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins is there. I mean, you've got just a group of guys who we don't know. He has an elite quarterback, the best quarterback he has ever played with, because, again, he was on the back end of Cam Newton, and it could be argued Cam Newton prime versus Josh Allen prime. But best quarterback, still in his prime, reunited with the best partnership he ever had with an offensive coordinator. And we are all projecting him to finish worse than he did as the wide receiver 3 in Washington with Sam Howell. Make it make sense.
No, I'm there with you. 11 games under a 60% snap share. That's not happening this year on the Bills. I think that, they drafted Keon Coleman to be an outside wide receiver, but that is not how I see him having success in the NFL. I think they'll stick to it because of the body type with the other, Keon Coleman, the other 2, you got Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. I think Shakir can step up into a bigger role, and that's the only thing that will threaten Curtis Samuel's, production outside of his own injury risk. Those are the 2 biggest factors for me. I also do think that Curtis Samuel operates best out of the slot. I think Dalton Kincaid is at least going to see 30% of his routes ran, not even his not his snaps, but his routes ran will be from the slot, and that's going to take away from Curtis Samuel. So I like Curtis Samuel a lot. I do think he'll be efficient with his touches, but it's just the very, very consistent injury history. He has played 1 season of 17 games, another 2 at 6. Yeah, another 2 at 16 games. So I don't know. It'll be a little bit tough for him if he doesn't stay healthy. Obviously, he's off the board. It's not going to matter. You drop him and move on. But if he is a difference maker, if he is that short yardage PPR monster, he is going to be really quickly one of the most popular waiver ads come like week 4.
Not in any league I'm in.
You don't think that if in the first couple of weeks he did not produce, you're not going to drop him and move on?
I'm holding steady. And one other thing, I'll let the other guys respond, but and this is just completely abject watching the game. I could be 100% wrong here, but I do feel like last season in Washington, he did line up on the outside quite a bit, and I felt like a lot of his production came from that. Again, I could be off on that, but that's how it felt watching the game.
I got you. While the other guys comment on it, I'll find that out.
So I just want to make something clear here. So Curtis Samuel, being number 43 here with Lee's pick, is the highest ranked Bills wide receiver on our board.
Yep. Actually, yeah, I thought Mason
besides me with Keon Coleman at 33. So,
and that's just because
are you guys saying something about Josh Allen's production? Are you guys saying something about Josh Allen's production?
Yeah, I don't think he should be drafted where he's going at all.
So where are you guys saying that he should be drafted like near Bryce Young?
I don't think
that's basically what you're saying with how you're ranking
other than Jalen Hurts should go in the top 3 rounds. That's the only quarterback, and that's because he has the rushing upside on top of 2 elite wide receivers.
Remove where he's going in redraft, Dan. Just quarterback only. Where are you drafting Josh Allen? At what quarterback spot?
I'm taking Jalen Hurts. I'm personally gonna take Mahomes and Lamar. Yeah. And
Dude,
Lamar.
Josh Allen in the last 4 seasons has finished in 3 of those seasons he's finished as QB1, I believe, and the only other one he finished as QB2. That is insane.
Okay, so who's this?
How are we not ranking any wide receiver more
I'm
than
too low on Curtis Samuel. I just said it. I'm too low on him. I should move him.
You're too low on Curtis Samuel, and that's what you give me back. Are you out of your what?
Keon Coleman wasn't that good in college. He was hot cold. Curtis Samuel's the wide receiver one.
Josh Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. That is insane. I don't think he repeats that. Other than that 15 touchdown year, he hasn't had anything in the double digits. I don't think that he touches he might touch it. He might come close to it, but I don't think he hits 4,000 passing yards this year.
Let me ask this to the consensus. Does one of Josh Allen's wide receivers break the top 40 this year?
Yes, it's Curtis Samuel.
But no.
It's Curtis Samuel.
You asked for it. You asked for it. We're on the player.
Let's up to that. Does Josh Allen produce a top 35 wide receiver?
What's the most yards Keon Coleman ever had in a college season?
700 something, right?
758.
Completely different. He's going to be used completely differently.
This is off the top. This just for everyone who's stuck around until now. This is how sick of fantasy addicts we are. You're like, what is Keon Coleman's top college production? I don't even pay attention to college, but I am fantasy sicko, and I got you.
I would bet all of you guys that one of the Bills receivers is going to make the top 35.
I mean,
I agree. I think
it's out of the equation.
Not a single one of you guys put your money where your mouth is there.
I mean,
Coleman 33. Here you go.
I will say, if you make Kincaid eligible for wide receiver finishes, I will take Dalton Kincaid inside of the top 30 wide receivers.
No, he's not eligible.
That's right. He's the top receiver. He's the guy.
He could be the top receiver. I still think he's going to the offense is going to produce more than a top 35 wide receiver.
I mean,
I think
it could happen. It just
I think they don't. You think they don't?
Kincaid is gonna. I think Kincaid's gonna have a great season. I think James Cook's gonna have a great season as well. I mean, whether it's through running or getting a lot of pass work. I also think that there's going to be a lot of inconsistency. I think there's going to be some weeks where Curtis Samuel goes off. I think there's going to be some weeks where Coleman. There's going to be some. I even like Shakir a lot. Like, I mean, I just think.
That's
There's not going to be a consistent.
It's going to have like the Mahomes effect.
Evan,
like none of his wide receivers are going to do good because he's just kind of spreading the ball
Evan,
around.
I think it's just going to be good.
You are very down on anybody with a remotely ambiguous wide receiver room. Right now, I'm seeing DJ Moore ranked as wide receiver 35. You got Keenan Allen as wide receiver 26. Don't understand how Keenan Allen's ahead of DJ Moore.
I think
DJ Moore behind Keon Coleman.
You're talking about a guy who was a top 10 guy last year after missing 6 games. I think he definitely it should be talked about within the top 26.
Hold on.
Oh, you're saying Keenan. So when Mike Williams was injured in week 2 and they had a terrible QJ and Joshua Palmer to lean on, of course they're going to lean on Keenan Allen. He's a proven wide receiver. However, now Keenan Allen joins DJ Moore in the 9th overall pick in the draft. I don't think that's going to happen this year. On top of a pass-catching running back and 2 athletic tight ends, he's not going to be the.
Okay, when was the last time Keenan finished below top 20?
When's the last time he wasn't on the Chargers?
I get that. So when was Stephon Diggs moving to a new team? Why are we high on people move to new teams and
ambiguous? We are not high on him because of ambiguous wide receiver rooms,
and that's actually why I'm not as high on Tank Dell. Ambiguous wide receiver rooms. That was going to be kind of a point that I bring up for my Tank Dell, and maybe this is a good transition. I don't know if we're still on Curtis Samuel.
We weren't going to hit another. We were going to hit another wide receiver today.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But Tank Dell would have been the next guy brought up. You would have talked about him there. You have him as wide receiver 42, which I think is insane. But even in that wide receiver room, you have Stephon Diggs as wide receiver 37. and then a very highly efficient Nico Collins as wide receiver 22, which is still 8 positions behind Sleeper's ADP as far as wide receivers go. So I think that it's just the same argument, but I don't see why you have, Keenan Allen ranked so highly. I don't see why there's a Bills wide receiver that has to be in the top 35 when you're putting DJ Moore as wide receiver 35.
Yeah, I think that Keenan Allen is the number 1 wide receiver on that team. So that's where the disparity.
How about this? I'll take DJ Moore over any Bills wide receiver per game.
DJ Moore over any Bills wide receiver per game.
Points per game.
And what do you mean? Like who wins most weeks?
So DJ Moore in points per game versus all Bills wide receivers in points per game.
Are you saying combined?
Like best ball?
Not best ball, but just points per game. So that means like if an injury occurs and they miss games, it's not the injury isn't what's affecting them.
I mean, I'm not going to include that. We're talking about guys that are like Chase Claypool. I'm not tying them, looping them into this.
We're just talking about Bills wide receivers versus DJ Moore. That's all.
But Chase Claypool is a Bills wide receiver. What do you mean?
All right, Evan, I'm boiling it down. You have DJ Moore ranked as wide receiver 35. You were just trying to say, how don't you guys have a Bills wide receiver ranked inside wide receiver 35?
Okay.
Therefore, I'm taking DJ Moore in a points per game basis, so I don't get screwed by injury for one wide receiver.
Okay, so you're saying DJ Moore does better than any Bills wide receiver. Okay, now I see what you're saying. Okay, so I'd have to pick that one receiver 4 of the year. Ooh,
you get a whole wide receiver room, and you ranked that guy wide receiver 35, compared to saying, how dare we not rank a Bills wide receiver inside top 35?
Coleman was at 33 for you, right? So I mean, that's just in line with your ranking.
DJ Moore could go up, honestly, for me. That is, I made this going with. I could be wrong about the Keenan Allen, and am I incredibly confident about that? No, it's a super ambiguous room. But I'm very confident in Josh Allen's ability to produce for a wide receiver. So those are 2 very different points.
Right. You kind of get to bet the field versus my one guy, but it is points per game.
I mean, I would, if I would bet well, the thing is I could be wrong about DJ Moore though. So I could, DJ Moore's pick is risky. And
you are wrong about DJ Moore because he is going to finish better than wide receiver 35.
I don't know. I think Keenan Allen is going to eat, and I think Rome Odunze is going to eat into it.
Then make the bet.
Okay, I'll take it. But just letting you guys know, you guys are crazy. I can't believe you guys didn't take the bet when the highest ranked Bills wide receiver was 43. I couldn't guys get you to take that straight up for 35.
Hold on. Oh, whoa.
Dan's making me pick a player for him.
Whoa.
Well, no, I told you as well that I would take a Bills wide receiver inside of the top 40, but if we're ranking them right now, it's so ambiguous. It's not a clear standout. And I don't think Keon Coleman's going to succeed in the role that they want him to.
So, real quick, I got to interject. 2 things that I'm shocked by. You have Keon Coleman above DJ Moore and Tank Dell, which is just mind-blowing to me. Curtis Samuel is clearly the most proven in the room. You have Keon Coleman at 33. Let's just go Curtis Samuel versus Keon Coleman, half-point PPR on the season.
Done.
I like it. Hold on. We got a comment in here? Boyos, I am trying to direct everything. Let's get these comments in here. Hello, I'm new here. What's happening?
I've already responded.
I don't know. Oh, you already responded?
Thank you for joining us, Gummy. We appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you having you here, man. Anytime you want to ask a question, or if you have an opinion where you're weighing in saying, hey, Evan, fuck you. DJ Moore should be higher than wide receiver 35. Yeah. Please comment that. We very much accept comments against Evan, especially. So,
yes.
If you want to slander Evan or Mason, come with it.
Love it.
If you got anything negative to say about me, keep it to yourself.
It fuels my fire.
Yeah, any other comments about any of us, just leave that to yourself. But anything about Evan.
I accept. See, listen. And now you're going to know the dynamic. People who aren't afraid of what's going to come at them. People with bold takes that they can stand by. Yes. That's somebody
one of these years will actually weigh who has the most accurate accurate projections and or rankings.
Well, if you actually thought a Bills wide receiver breaks the top 35, I think you guys should have picked one and put him in there. But that's how I do my ranking.
These are rankings though. Like I will take look
How I
at the
do my
30
rankings.
look at 35 through 40. I will take Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Jaden Reed, Jackson Smith and Jigma, and Christian Watson above any Bills wide receiver.
So I think I had him above all of those, or had all those guys above him except for JSN.
Above who is him, you said?
I had above Keon, I believe. Who'd you say?
You got JSN at 36 and Keon at 33.
Yeah, so that's
Christian Watson is the only player. Oh, and Chris Godwin, actually. No, yeah, you have a lot of those players that I just mentioned.
I have him above
him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Your rankings are wild, bro. Check them out, though. Make sure you check out the YouTube page. We got a bunch of this stuff up here. We're going to be talking more rankings through the next 2 weeks at least. We got running backs coming up next. We'll cap it off with both quarterbacks and tight end. Might mix in a mock draft somewhere in there. Keep you on your toes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We appreciate all of you guys out there. We truly, truly do. So get prepared for your draft. Make sure you're coming back. We got you guys covered here at the Fantasy Rant Podcast. Everyone have a great week.
Foot Mason.